You are watching Toon Matrix. Please watch previous part for better understanding. In the last part we saw that Duyup was brought to justice, and at the place where the Vigilante and Duyup had fought, their police has arrived. Two police detectives are staring at the dead body of Duyup. Let's call them Detective A and B. The investigating team is collecting the evidence nearby, and Detective A briefs about the situation, that how Duyup escaped due to sheer luck before police raided the club, and at the place where he hid the money, he was beaten to death. Detective B asks, "How did you know that it was here? Did you get a report?" Detective A replies that, the phone they were tracking was turned on, allowing the police to discover this place. Then he shows Detective B the phone screen that Duyup was looking at his last moments. Detective B asks, was he on social media at his deathbed? Detective A says that Soo Duyup had previously served time for being found complicit in the murder, and this was the victim's account. While descending from the scene, Detective A concludes that this was a conflict between drug traffickers. In order to get rid of their competition, they made a report to the police, and the person who was using Duyup as a proxy killed him in attempt to erase any tracks. Detective B agrees with Detective A, but he wonders why Duyup was on the victim's account on his deathbed. While they were discussing, an officer came running towards them. He reports that the media is constantly asking the permission for coverage. Detective A says that they have already given them files and asks the officer to refuse them. The officer interrupts them again, reporting that detectives from Anyang department have arrived. The scene changes to ABC broadcast station. As reporter Choy walks into the office, every worker present there welcomes her by cheering and saying that she is today's main character. Choy was baffled for a moment. Then director Guak tells her that their program has set a record in the station for most viewers, and all of their ads are sold out too. Choy asks what is this. Soo Duyup was killed and the Vigilante chose a criminal that they reported as his target. Guak replies that, the police said that this was not done by the Vigilante, rather it was a result of infighting between drug traffickers. Choy says that they have to quickly find the location where Soo Duyup died. Then one of the reporter tells her that, police has just given them basic information and not anything else, and until they're done investigating, they can't do anything. Choy interrupts him by asking the info file given by the police. After reading the file, she gets really mad. She shouts at the people present there, saying that there is approximately 60 minutes difference when police raided the club and when Duyup died. He had to have used a taxi to move, and he didn't head directly to the secret location. He must have got off nearby hiding from all the people nearby, and the location is approximately 30 to 40 minutes away from the club. She shows the reporter a picture saying that there are a lot of transmission tower at one place, which means that there is a substation or an industrial complex nearby. Then she shows them another picture saying that, the bridge has 8 lanes, which means it's a highway, but in another picture, they can only see 6 lanes. She concludes that the location of murder is a highway intersection in Gyeonggi somewhere near a substation or an industrial complex. She shouts that the Vigilante took the bait we worked hard on, and asks if they all are going to just chat over some alcohol. The people present there are quite confused, but due to Choy forcing them they run off to do their respective work. She says if it's this distance, it could be on Street View. She instructs Doon to find possible points that fit this description and asks rest of the members to search all nearby points using Street View, and if there is somewhere that looks similar, they should go on their own to confirm it. Guak rolls onto Choy's side like a ball, and he also starts to scold the reporters. Choy goes away saying that she has some work to do, and she expects progress in the case when she returns. Choy's self thinks that this isn't a drug case. This time also there would definitely be a trace of Vigilante. The scene shifts to where Jiyong is sitting in the washroom looking at his wound caused by metal chain. He is relieved that the injury is not that big. It would have been bad if his bone had been damaged. He comments that he learned a lot from this case, and even if Duyup was on social media at his deathbed, the police will think that it's a drug conflict and not the Vigilante. He walks away with a relieved face thinking that he have to remain in shadows, for the sake of his ambitions. Then he gets a notification about the news, and the headline was, Vigilante strikes again. The scene shifts, and we see that a young woman got into a car accident. A person in the black hood approaches her, and she is clearly scared of the hooded guy. The guy comes and breaks the car window, asking her to come out. She pleads the hooded guy to not do this, but neglecting her pleads, he started punching the lady, saying that this is heaven's punishment. We see that two more person came from behind the hooded guy, saying that they are just doling out the punishment that the law refuses to. Then an anchor reports that there are unending number of vigilante imitators that have been appearing recently. In the recent case, the victim was a 25-year-old woman who, 3 years ago, gravely injured a family of 4 while driving under influence. She was released after 1.5 years due to her reaching an agreement with the family. He further reports that the woman was chased by 3 high schoolers and currently is in a comatose state. The scene changes to the police station, where one of the 3 assailants, high schoolers, says that, even after the accident, the woman kept driving under the influence and posted it in social media. The family till now can't even walk properly, then how come the person who ran into them can live normal? Is this justice? If they look at the end result, isn't it just the victims that gets trampled on? He says if they look on the internet, everyone is saying that the vigilante is the justice itself, and that's what the high schoolers also think. He is telling this all to a reporter. He says that they are aware of Korean Juvenile Act, and if they go online, they can see many people are saying that they would have become the vigilante if they were still a minor. He says that Korean Juvenile Act is our right, and since we have that right, we thought that we should take advantage of it while we can. The reporter was going to ask something, but one of the police officer stops him from doing so. They argue with each other, and the police officer keeps on insisting to stop it. Then reporter Choy exclaims that as the member of press they have the duty to report the voice of these students. The officer, annoyed, replies that, "You are just coaxing provocative statements out of those children like a snake." He says, if just people like them didn't report the vigilante as the hero, then there wouldn't be this many vigilante imitation cases. Then someone reports that, at the moment, while public opinion about the vigilante is extremely split, multitudes of imitation, big and small, have popped up, the worst part being that the majority of the imitators are young teenage boys. Then we see that several people are in a debate about vigilante, if he is a criminal or a chivalrous person. They continue on blabbering and debating, so let's just skip this part. Jiyong, while looking at the debate from his phone, remarks that, if they had shown even a quarter of that passion for protecting the institution of law for the victims, then someone like him wouldn't exist. He says, they are telling him to say something to those students? Alright then, he quotes, "Don't do something that's beyond you." The scene changes, and we see that reporter Choy gets a call from someone. The other person says, "We found the location," and upon hearing this she was quiet for a moment. Then she asks the person to go at scene and she will send the instruction later, as she is going to jurisdictional office with Guak. The person asks, "Then what about the murder scene?" Choy replies that, "It's been 2 days since the incident occurred, and there will be no evidence at the scene right now." She asks the person to go to the office right after visiting the location, and then she cuts the call. Guak asks if she is telling him to go, and she replies in affirmative. While walking away she says that she has to do something that only she can do. Guak asks, "And what is that something?" With a cunning smirk she replies, making the vigilante acknowledge and rely on their program. Then the scene shifts, and we see Jiyong walking into Professor Lee's office, but he finds that Sunwook is already there. Sunwook tells him that he was not able to sleep, so he thought he might as well organize the professor's files. While they were doing their work, Jiyong notices something, and we see that Professor Lee also comes to the office and he finds both of them sitting there. Jiyong says that he thought Professor was in Seoul, to which the professor replies that he just arrived here, and seeing the lights on, he came to the office. Then they all silently do their work while sitting in front of their computers. Professor breaks this silence by calling out to Sunwook. He asks Sunwook, why'd he come to the police academy? After a moment of pause, he replies that, he wants to become a person who can protect the justice and protect the weak. Professor is satisfied with his answer, then he asks Jiyong, why did he come here? Jiyong, while intensely glaring at previous criminal records, replies something, but we readers are not told about it, and upon hearing his answer, both Sunwook and Professor are shocked. The scene shifts where Diop was killed and police are searching the surrounding areas. Before continuing the story, let's make it easy for you guys. The detective with black hair, let's call him Byung-go, and the detective with red hair is Hong Dale. Let the other two detectives be Detective A and B. Detective A asks from the detectives from Anyang, what are they talking about, and says that this is definitely a drug conflict. Byung-go replies that the culprit could also be a suspect that they are chasing. Detective A replies, there is no such possibility because the time span is very short between the report and Soo Diop's death, and an individual is not capable of taking care of someone that quickly. He explains that this case's suspect must first have the power of organization at their disposal, and second, be acutely aware of how drug rings and investigation work. It can be deduced that Soo Diop had buried the book prior to the incident. He had already prepared a plan, he was ready to deal with the book as soon as he was caught, and when he really was caught, he quickly executed his plan. Byung-go asks, did they find anything at the scene? While pointing towards Diop's deathbed he replies, that they have found so much that it's uncountable and the investigation department is in middle of collecting it. Byung-go says, most likely, anything to ascertain the culprit's identity won't be found. He asks, Soo Diop was beaten to death by fists, right? He says, violent criminals don't usually change their weapons, a sharp weapon, a blunt weapon, they tend to use the weapons that they are already used to, and the weapon the suspect uses is fists. The scene rolls back to when Professor Lee was shocked upon hearing Ji-young's answer, and asks him to repeat himself. Ji-young nonchalantly says that, he chose to be a policeman because he believed it was a stable occupation. If it's a prosecutor or a judge, they could eventually be replaced by artificial intelligence, but policemen are not replaceable. Both Professor and Sunwook are speechless at Ji-young's reply. Then Sunwook says that Ji-young's thinking is very deep. If a judge merely looks at the laws and makes their decision, they could be replaced by AI, and he agrees with it. But it's only possible for humans to hate crime and feel empathy for victims. He asks Ji-young if he is saying that policeman, who directly involves in the gruesome scene and interacts with the victims, is the occupation that requires most humanity, right? Upon hearing this, Professor thinks for a while and ends the day here, and asks them to go back and take some rest. While heading down the corridor, Sunwook advises Ji-young to be careful what he says around the professor. Ji-young replies that Sunwook was right back there in the professor's office, and that is really what he thinks. Sunwook smiles at Ji-young's reply, and while walking away he says, let's become policemen that wipe the tears of those wronged, the victims. Then from Hongdae's point of view, we are briefed about a case. The victim is a 23-year-old male, who was delivering packages at night and after being hit by a truck, he perished. When the police arrived at the scene and looked through the camera memory, they discovered something unexpected. The recording showed the driver getting out of the vehicle following the collision, then he walked over to the injured victim, watching his movements. Then, the driver proceeds to get back in the truck and backed up, running over the collapsed man with the truck. Then we see an old lady crying in front of an officer. While crying she says that because of her being penniless, his son, Hyang-shik had to work without even being able to go to college. Then she shows a cup of ramen to the officer saying that, this was in his son's bag, and he died without getting to eat it. We see that the officer is none other than Detective Hongdae. He consoles the old lady, and tells her that, despite being aware of the accident, the culprit didn't call the emergency number and instead backed up on Mr. Hyang-shik. The culprit can't even come up with a reason for why he backed up then. He says that even the prosecutor judged it to be a murder case, and he is sure that culprit will be brought to justice at the courthouse. But to their dismay, the court determined that the culprit, Chi-gyu-ho, had no intention to kill and therefore the case will not be judged as murder case, but instead as an involuntary manslaughter, and the sentence that Chi-gyu-ho received was imprisonment for only 1 year and 2 months. The mother of the victim was crying heavily for such a short sentence for the murder of his son, while Detective Hongdae was speechless at the verdict. Then we see that Detective Hongdae approaches the judge of this case. The judge asks who is he, to which he replied that he was the detective in charge of the case just now. He tells the judge that there is a saying within the transportation industry that, rather than being in an ambiguous accident, it's much better to just up and kill the other person. This is because if the victim happens to live, there will be consequences and the victim will have to be compensated, and that's why they say that when driving a heavy vehicle like a bus or a truck, it's better to not step on the brake during the collision in order to make sure the victim perishes. The judge remarks that it sounds like an urban legend, and detective agrees with him. However, it just occurred in real life. Before the police went through the camera, Chi-gyu-ho didn't even mention backing up, and when this fact was revealed he constantly kept on changing his confession and lied multiple times. Hongdale exclaims that Chi-gyu-ho really believed that urban legend and ran over Haeong-shik with the intent to kill. The judge shouts and asks, why is Hongdale chasing after him and saying all this about a case that has already been closed? He says that the culprit has the right to lie and change their story, and that cannot be the basis of guilt. And on top of saying this, the judge blames that it's the fault of the police and detectives who couldn't find any evidence to confirm his guilt. Byung-go comes in time and apologizes to the judge, and then the judge walks away. Then Byung-go scolds Hongdale, asking what the hell is he doing. Hongdale thinks that a year has already passed since the Haeong-shik accident case and the culprit must have already been released. Byung-go calls out to Hongdale, bringing back him to his senses in present. Hongdale apologizes and says that he was just thinking. Then they both go to the deathbed of Soo Do-yup to investigate, but Hongdae is still reminiscing about the Haeong-shik case. The scene changes and we see Jiyong jogging. He comments that there was lot to learn from this time. He keeps on thinking again and again that, did he destroy the evidence properly? Was there something he missed? And he remembers the question that Professor asked him, that why did he want to become a policeman? He stops, and then thinks that, luckily, the target he chose this time around was also reported on the news. This is also important. If he chose a target that a civilian wouldn't be able to, it could become evidence for the vigilante investigation. But while organizing the files today, he found another person that he had to make a visit to. It would be good if it was on the news, but this is a case where he can't just sit around, waiting for it to be covered on the news. Then he had an idea that he'd just tip off the broadcast agency. The scene shifts to Do-yup's death place, and we see that reporters are swarming in for a scoop. Then we see Detective A talking to his superior on a phone call. He got instructions to announce the Do-yup's case and do a press briefing, and he complies with it. At the police station, an officer informs Detective A that there was a call from Anyang Police Department. Detective A says that they are so annoying and asks the officer to tell them that there's nothing. He comments that detectives at Anyang couldn't make any progress with their own case, so they came crawling over here. Then again the officer calls out to Detective A, and shows him a report that was just broadcasted. He sees the report. We see that the broadcast is from Report 25 News Channel, and they are covering the Do-yup's case in this broadcast. The anchor blabbers on for quite long, so long story short, he tells the viewers how Vigilante may have lured Do-yup in an isolated place and brought him to justice there, and at his deathbed how Do-yup was forced to visit the victim's account on social media and reminded of his sins. And following this incident, one of the two women accomplices of Do-yup, whose release was nearing, feared the Vigilante, and in order to avoid him, she attempted to increase her sentence by confessing the other crimes she committed. And at last the anchor drops a question for viewers and leave it to them to decide that, whether the Vigilante is someone who destroys the law and order of the society or a righteous person. Upon seeing the broadcast, Detective A shouts in anger at what they are doing. The scene changes and we see reporter Choy walking down a corridor, and self-talks, "What do you think, Vigilante? I am calling your name so valiantly. Please look my way, come and become my flower." At Anyang Police Station, Detective Byung-go and Detective Hongdale with other detectives are discussing about Do-kyung's case, about who could be the culprit of that case. Hongdale leaves the room, and while he was walking away, he gets a call from someone. He answers the call and asks if this isn't the number of Haeong-shik's mother. The other person, after a moment of pause, replies that the mother killed herself not too long ago, and upon hearing this Hongdale was quite shocked. While he was sweating because of the shock, the other person tells him that the truck driver came to visit her and then it happened. The scene shifts to where Chi-gyu is looking at his truck. He comments that the truck has deteriorated after it was left alone, and remarks that it'd be better to sell it. He goes around and asking people if they want to buy his truck, and we see that he is being followed by Jiyong. Jiyong thinks that he have to be careful, as there is chance that Chi-gyu killed the man by accident. Then he notices something, and we see that Hongdale comes running from behind and goes to confront Chi-gyu, the truck driver. Chigu says that he is surprised to see him, and asks what business does he have. Hongdale with a grim expression asks, why did he go to visit the victim's mother, and what kind of things did he say? Chigu replies that he just went there to apologize about how unfortunate it was, and he is deeply repenting. Upon hearing this, Hongdale gets really mad, and while cursing asks what is he repenting about. Chigu asks the detective that why is he like this, he is making him the bad guy here, he says, he is just another hardworking citizen. He then tells the detective to not look for him again, and after giving the warning he starts to walk away. The detective grabs his shoulder and asks Chigu, why did he back up? Haeong Shik wasn't confirmed dead at that time. With frustration showing on his face, the detective says that if you saw a person get hit by your car, you should have called for emergency quickly, and asks if that was really a mistake. Chigu replies that, if she just peacefully came to an agreement, then there would be no need for any hard feelings. But that woman just kept shouting, telling me to confess honestly. With a smug face he says that, he still sincerely apologized and I told her that living people have to live, so I'll diligently live your son's share of life as well. He says if detective have heard of a saying, with an evil smile, in Latin he says, non bis in idem, which means that legal actions can't be taken more than once for the same crime. The detective was quite stunned after hearing Chigu's words, and Chigu snaps off his hand and walks away. Jiyong was listening to their conversation while standing outside the door, and we see that he is really pissed at Chigu's words. The scene changes to Anyang police station, and we see that Byunggo is scolding Hongdale for looking for the culprit from a finished case, while they are already stressed over Jong Deokon case. Hongdale just stands there being scolded. Then another officer named Chai Gyungsa approached them, and gives a letter that is addressed to Hongdale. Then Byunggo gives him work to do. Hongdale is tasked to analyze the broadcast made by Report 25 and see if there is something that can help them with their investigation. Hongdale, with a sad demeanor, sits in front of his PC looking at the broadcast, and at the same time he was wondering that, Chigyu must have backed up on purpose, he can't forget the face he was making back then. He says if it's like this with me, then he definitely said the same shit to Haeong Shik's mother, or he could have said something even worse. Hongdale says that he wouldn't put it past him. Then he sees the broadcast which was displaying that Report 25 is collecting information about those who continue to commit crimes even after experiencing favor from the law. The scene changes to nighttime, and we see that reporter Choy is roaming around in casual clothes, and wondering who is the vigilante. She goes around the areas where the vigilante was active, she imagines and imitates the vigilante. She thinks from vigilante's point of view, if I am the vigilante, then I am an honest member of the society during the week, and can only punish criminals on weekends. I don't use a weapon, and there is a reason why I don't use the weapon, but there's also a psychological reason that's hard to explain. My justice is not wrong, it's just different. I target those that have gone through the justice system and received a light sentence compared to the weight of the crimes. She says that the vigilante is a careful person, that there are no any evidences left even after several incidents. But then she notices that all the places where the vigilante already struck are all open places with many viewing angles. She wonders if vigilante, by any chance, unconsciously wishing for his destruction. She is shocked upon this hypothesis. She says, "You can't be caught yet, you have to continue what you were doing, for my sake," and she drives away in her car. The scene shifts to ABC broadcast station. The Report 25 managing team are viewing the information they received about unjust crimes, but they have received over 20,000 submissions. They see that most of the submission are just useless requests. They comment that this is not an assassination request board or something like that. Then they all start to sort the submissions as reporter Choy wants the useful ones by 7 o'clock. The scene shifts to Detective Hongdale sitting in front of his computer at his house. We see that he is already quite drunk, and he is writing the report about the suspect Chigyu Ho. Then he receives a call from his senior and was summoned right now, and we see that he sent a mail to someone about the suspect Chigyu Ho, and the same we can see with Jiyong that he had also mailed something to someone. While sitting in front of his computer he says that, 1 year ago, there was little bit coverage on the truck accident. He sent a submission asking to look into this incident, and he also uploaded a post onto a site where the imitators gather on. The people at the broadcasting agency are definitely keeping an eye on that site. If there's any movement there, it'll definitely draw their attention. Then this week, I'll definitely get to work. If the agency sees that the Vigilante targets the subjects that are mentioned on the site before anything is broadcast, they'll be afraid of losing the initiative and would air stories even faster. Then, he'll be able to control it so what he wants gets broadcasted on the news. The scene changes to ABC broadcast. When Choy was walking in, a reporter asks if she got the report he sent, and she replies in affirmative, and then calls 3 reporters Minho, Gyuho, and Young-hoo. She tells them to go and take an interview of Chigyu of that truck reverse delivery boy murder case. She is going to put a preview for it in next week's program, and then she starts to write a title for preview on the whiteboard. Then Minho says that he don't think that Chigyu will agree to an interview. In the first place, he wouldn't even pick up their call. Choy replies of course he won't, and asks them to first call him and get rejected. And after that investigate everything around and about him and everyone around him, then he will be afraid of rumors spreading, and instead come to us of his own violation. Minho asks, while they do that, what if a controversy occurs over privacy complaints? Choy intensely glares at them and says that she's curious as to what they all can accomplish on their own. The other reporters gets a little anxious and agrees to do the work. Then the scene changes, and we see that Chigyu, while humming a song, is going in a public bathroom. And when he sits in the bathtub to relax, we see a young man silently approaching from behind, and while Chigyu was relaxing, the young man suddenly shoves Chigyu's head into the bathtub. When Chigyu was about to drown from suffocation, the man pulls out his head from the water. Chigyu, while panting, tries to ask who is he, to which the young man replies, "Didn't you said this yourself? What is the ghost doing not punishing someone like that?" He says, "Well, I am that ghost," and after saying this he again shoves his head in the water, suffocating him to death.
And now, folks, it's time to say goodnight. We sincerely appreciate your patronage and hope we've succeeded in bringing you an enjoyable evening of entertainment. Please drive home carefully and come back again soon.